Okay, we continue with configuring a basic wireless LAN on a wireless LAN controller. Right, what do we have? Configuring a wireless LAN on a controller. All right, let me begin by explaining the difference between, we've introduced a wireless router. Right, let me change my pen there. Right. So we begin by right. So let me begin by explaining the difference between a wireless router. The question may arise, where am I supposed to use a wireless router? Where am I supposed to use an access point? Where am I supposed to use a controller? Right, these are three different devices. In a very small network, home network, you can use a wireless router because router, it offers you access to the internet, wired clients, as well as wireless clients. Rine maports ekuti unokwanisa kuisa ma-wired clients ako, rinokwanisa broadcaster a network yoita a wireless network. So in a small office, you can have a wireless router rega. And when you want to extend, access point is used to extend that network. Right, now with the controller. I'm hearing some, okay. Now with the controller, this one, Torishandisa for much bigger networks, for enterprise networks. Instead of having a combination here, wireless router, ne access point, you now have a combination in a controller, the access point. Then access to the internet is probably being provided by a router. All right, let me see if I can do this. So in a normal setup, the setup that we are going to configure actually, you have your router, not wireless router. Then you have a switch. Then you have your controller. Then here you have your access points. Probably here we're going to have our admin. So our internet will be coming from this side. This is an enterprise network. From this switch, you can have multiple access points, as many access points as you can have. We explained in concepts, the reason why we have a controller is because now we have quite a number of access points that we are using. Because of that, there is need for central management of all those access points. If I'm using a small network, ndokwanisa kuita one access point, ndokwanisa configure one access point, no problem. But kana awandisa, it becomes very difficult. That's why we have a controller being used in a combination of access points. So we have three devices, the access point, the controller, and the wireless router. They get used in different ways depending on the coverage yauri kuda nekukura kwakaita network yako. Configuring a wireless LAN controller is not that much different from configuring a wireless router. We'll get to see that. The controller controls access points and provides more services and management capabilities. Definitely. Controller provides more services and management capabilities. Wireless controllers, LAN controllers have layer 2 switch ports, visual interfaces that are created very similar to VLANs. Each physical port can support many APs and wireless LANs. Right, so this is a controller that in Irabe. You can see my ports are my physical ports. These are the physical ports. At now, right? My physical ports, wow, as we will be doing my configurations, there will be VLANs which will be configured on those physical ports. Every wireless LAN, every wireless network that we are going to have, it is going to be associated with a VLAN. We'll get to see what are the benefits that come with that. Every wireless LAN is associated with a VLAN. Therefore, wireless LAN controller radio, it needs to also be configured to function NEMA virtual interfaces. So, my controllers to create my VLANs. My controllers here to create my virtual interfaces. We will get there. So this is our controller radio. Right. Configuring a wireless LAN. This is right. This is the topology that we are going to be using to make our configurations. As you can see it in a controller radio here, we have our switch, we have a server, admin, then we have one access point and a wireless host, which is going to be used here. A few things that I need to put across you so that you understand sort of from a different perspective how you should look at this network, so that you know what configurations should be done on the network, right? So let's start with the admin. Admin is there. It's just a PC in IRM network which gives us access to our wireless router, to our graphical user interface. This admin can get its IP address via DHCP directly from the controller, or unokwanisa kuchiisa statically. In this case, yanga yakaiswa statically. Server redu riri apa iri is the server that we are going to be using for radius. Radius, just a minute. Okay, so I was talking of this topology. We have discussed the admin, and I said the admin will give us access to the wireless controller. Then we have our server there. When we will be doing our configurations, the server will give us access to our radius services. So server redu, we talked of WPA2 enterprise. There is need a server for authentication, authorization, and accounting. So this is our server rotation set, which is our radius server. Right. This is our controller. This is our access point, lightweight access point. It's not autonomous. This is a lightweight access point. As far as configurations go, you can see admin edu in an IP address, IRM network. So everything this side, this is a network in a 192.168.200.0. There's also .5.0. 192.168.5.0. Ndo network yedu iri this side. Then side rine radius server, that's another network 172. We have another network 172.3.1.1.0/24. That's another network that we have. Right. My configurations edu atichaita. We are going to start from 0 to make our configurations. It's not a lab, a packet tracer pre-configured already. We are going to start from 0. So per PC you need an IP address. Server ready, you need an IP address. This interface repa router, it will need an IP address. This interface iri, as you can see, pane ma sub interfaces akaiswa apa. Sub interface rakaiswa, meaning there's inter VLAN routing iripo. I'm giving you an overview yema configurations esatishayita. Pane inter-VLAN routing iripo yakaiswa apa. The reason why pane inter-VLAN routing is because every wireless LAN that is going to be created, by controller ready, rinenge riri associated with a VLAN. It will mean traffic iri kufamba panapa. Traffic iri kubva PC. Let's start with the wireless host. Wireless host redu, let's say are connected to wireless LAN 5. That's the network you are connected to. Wireless LAN 5 is associated with the VLAN 5. It will mean traffic ichasvika apa VLAN 5 yoya kucontroller VLAN 5, controller roendesa kurouter VLAN 5, then router rozoti information iri kuenda kupi. Traffic VLAN 5 ndo iri kufamba if iri kubva kuwireless LAN number 5. Kana pane wireless LAN number 10 iri associated to VLAN 10, it will mean the traffic VLAN 10 will also traverse here as well. So tatone two VLANs at now. We also have from this example .200 here. Pane VLAN 200 as well. Management. In this case, it was a management VLAN. Traffic management, it used VLAN 200. Traffic group of admin, for example, their management, because we're getting access to the controller via admin. 3 VLANs that open. Kana tine ma VLAN matatu. Don't forget the basics. It means for communication between those VLANs, there is need here inter-VLAN routing. That's why per router redu, specifically for this interface, Panama configurations, EMA sub interface, so that you can have inter-VLAN routing. That said, it means link iraperi, this link, they are now being treated as my trunk because Panama multiple VLANs which are traversing those links. So those are the configurations when we start from go to configure. So in summary, my IP address is here and here. Interface richard configure. Panapa pache configure inter-VLAN routing because we have a number of VLANs. It's remote network. The reason why we have a number of VLANs is because best practice, you need to have separate VLANs for separate wireless LANs. It's not like hotspot here. Yatinogadzira paphone pedu. Yongoti munhu wese gets access zvakafanana zviri normal. In a very large enterprise, in a huge organization, you see, how do I put this? The wireless network, the Wi-Fi, in a case one, you can have multiple Wi-Fis. You don't have one you're not connected to. Okay, I know by UZ, on a UZ students, on a UZ staff, my network yes are broadcast where you are. And I use an different one, they get different access. My passwords akasiyana. So in a very large enterprise, my networks anenge akawandisa. So as more networks get created, you need to associate them with different VLANs. And the benefits that come with that, excuse me, benefits that come with that are the same that come with when we started discussing my benefits of VLAN, segmenting a network. In terms of security, it's much easier. Pushing my policies, my access control policies, for example, because my networks are different VLANs. In terms of performance, if in a network yako, one wireless LAN ikadakwa. Since it is only associated to one VLAN, it means it does not affect another wireless LAN. Some of the benefits that come with separating my wireless LAN. So once we have my different wireless LANs associated with the different VLANs, my ports are, as I said, after configure SEMA trunk, very important. Particular configurations after configure SEMA trunk. Then pan up for wireless controller. Dopa cha configure my networks ash. Dopa cha edera ma wireless LAN 5, wireless LAN 10, with wireless LAN 5. In SSID, I gotta say, So what is its SSID? What is its security settings? Ichashandisa personal here kana kuti enterprise. Where will the clients demo wireless LAN 5 get their IP addresses? Those are DHCP settings. Where will they get their settings? So as we do our configurations, you are going to see kuti, for example, wireless LAN 5E. Network yayo ichaita 192.168.5.0/24. Ichakonfigwa default gateway racho roya roiswa panapa. Panoiswa sub interface apa. Iri sub interface rakaiswa apo. Ndo richaita default gateway. Parouter iyi as well pachaiswa DHCP pool. DHCP pool richa offer my addresses to all the clients remote wireless LAN 5. Wireless LAN 10 going to configure 192.168.10.0/24. Another network. Every client ichapinda wireless LAN 10, it will get their IP addresses via this network. So another pool is created for router so that it gives us my IP addresses. We will also see could controller ready. It also has my capabilities. It could offer my addresses dynamically. But the reason why we are using router here is because controller ready can only manage as much my IP addresses, can only dynamically give as much as my IP addresses. So best practice, to controller my IP addresses, dynamically, my IP addresses in my devices are repo for management. For example, admin PCAD, it will get its IP address from the controller. My AP is SA, my access points SA, they'll get their IP addresses from the controller. But for my clients like this one, they will not be getting my addresses from the controller. They'll be getting their addresses from the router radio. So these are some of the configurations that Chaita. I think that's a overview. I might have missed a thing or two, but as we go, we'll get to explain everything. All right. Basic wireless LAN configuration. It includes the following steps. Logging in the controller, creating the wireless LAN, apply, enable, select interface, secure wireless LAN, verify if it is operational, monitor, view the client information. Let's go through that. Logging in. Logging in, I know CNA router. IP address. What is the IP address of the controller? In our example, management interface redo was 192.168.0. Let me check. .200.200.254. Iyo ndo IP address ye controller yedu 192.168.200.254. Right. So unongoenda pa browser 192.168.200.254, enter. However, I've realized the protocol that you use here is not HTTP but HTTPS. So you have something like this. Instead of using HTTP, you use HTTPS. That's how you get access to the controller. Oisa username yako, oisa password. By the way, username and password is created, but it's not initial setup. Initial setup, the moment you own IP address ish with HTTP, right? Two protocols dzakasiyana. Ukashandisa HTTP out of the box, controller rako rubonotengwa. Ushandisa HTTP, you get to what we call initial setup. But the practical, you get to see that. Initial setup, that's where you configure the username, jashansa password, jashansa etc., etc. It's a bit different in a wireless router. Wireless router, it has defaults. The password is default. The username is default. You log in using those defaults. Then you later change them. With the controller, depending on the type of controller, probably, with the controller, there's an initial setup. The moment you try to log in, that initial setup, don't create a username ako, passwords ako. Then you use them paunoita initial login. So in this slide, rakatangira pa initial login, utori ne username, utori ne password. How do you log in? So this is how you log in, username, password yako. Creating a wireless LAN. Ma steps aripo panapa akatangira kumberi. If you are following this and I explainer, pakati panapa, you will see my configurations anototangira kuisa basic network configuration according to topology. My IP address is here, IP address is here, interVLAN routing, pa VLAN pa switch iri ndandatosira creating the VLANs themselves. Pa switch apa pacha create ma VLANs. All those things azvipo pa this slide. Varungotangira pako create a wireless LAN. How do you create a wireless LAN? As you can see, this is the user interface, the controller redu, almost the same. Rakada ofanana nere wireless router redu. You can see my tabs, tine monitor, wireless LAN controllers. Practice, experience, browsing through every tab up. As far as creating a wireless LAN, you just go per tab wireless LAN. As you can see, type wireless LAN. You go and create a new wireless LAN somewhere here. In this corner, new, create new. So you create a new wireless LAN. Once you click create new wireless LAN, this is what you get. You type in the type of network that you have, definitely a wireless LAN, the profile name, the SSID, and the ID of the wireless LAN. Since ndati ma wireless LAN anocreatwa by an enterprise network anenge akawandisa, so they are identified in my IDs. That's why you have wireless LAN 5. Probably 5 is the ID, so that you can be able to identify wireless LAN change our settings or it connected to this specific client each. Ndoma settings atatanga nawo pana. Best practice says IDE should be the same ne VLAN area associated to. So pauno creator ukaisa VLAN ukaisa ID panapa 5. Make sure that this wireless LAN is associated with VLAN 5. Ukaisawo iri 10. Just a minute. Ukaisawo iri 10. Make sure it is associated to VLAN 10. Ukaisa ID 20. Make sure it is associated with. Make sure it's associated with 20. We'll get there. Right. So what creator you apply? Once you apply, you get here. Apply and enable the wireless LAN. Once you apply, you get here. So from these tabs, that's where you can configure. You can enable. The first thing you do, you enable the network. If it's not enabled, the wireless network will not broadcast. It will not be working. That's where you can as well, right here, link para interface. That's where you associate your wireless LAN with a virtual interface. So you can create a wireless LAN 5. Panapa unengoka create ma interfaces ako. We have not created them yet. I don't know how the slide was made. Once you have your interfaces, ukauya ukaita drop down ma interfaces ako VLAN 5, VLAN 10, esa unengoka create. So kana wa create a wireless LAN 5, you associate it with the VLAN 5. You drop down this panabuda VLAN 5. Kana waka create a wireless LAN ye management. You can see the drop down ripo the management interface. You can as well go and up security, you configure the security settings wireless LAN yako. Without it authentication type people, without it encryption type people. You can as well, in this stage, we are going to configure, we are not going to configure QoS, ne policy mapping, but we are going to activate FlexiConnect from advanced settings up. Managing your access points via a one link. We'll get there. Select interface. We've selected interface already. We've selected management in this case. Secure wireless LAN. Tawaya security. How do we secure? Pa security, to choose a WPA2 policy. ndo ine personal enterprise. Personal yakaita sei? Personal ndo iri apa iyi, PSK iri apa yakanzi 8021X iyo. That's a protocol rinoshanda paenterprise. So in this case they selected personal in a PSK. Once you select personal, it means there is need for a pre-shared key. Ndo iri apa iyi, PSK format. That's the pre-shared key. Oisa password yako. Now a client, if they want to access the internet, they will be using SSID or created just before and this password. Verify VLAN. Once you've configured, you can verify. You can see VLAN yako ma configurations aripo, name rayo iro. Is it enabled? What is the security that it has? WPA2 PSK. That is verifying. Monitor wireless LAN. Monitor tab. Ukaenda pa monitor tab, you can see it's probably not as visible, but you can see panap controller summary. You can see the management IP address. You can see wireless LAN data creator panap in wireless LAN data creator, and you can see the number of clients that are connected to that wireless LAN. Kana ma wireless LAN akawanda, you can see as well with are functional on the app, as functional on the app. The controller, as its name suggests, it controls, it manages kuti network yako inenge yakaita sei. And this is how you manage. You go pa monitor tab and you see kuti network yese iri kufunctiona sei. View wireless client details. Okay, wireless client details. You can see as well kuti are connected to the network ndiani. So ukaenda pa ma wireless clients, you can monitor kana kubvisa munhu pa network. That's where everything there happens. Let's move. Configuring enterprise wireless LAN. So what we've done, we have created a wireless LAN the same way we had created a wireless LAN per router. Per wireless router, data login, but I create a SSID in a security. It's the same thing that I'm going to simple setup. Now we look at enterprise. Enterprise, not much to talk about. Enterprise that was out cheap. Pane server. We have server radius, which is used for authentication. So instead of communicating with only the AP so that you get authenticated, you now have to get access from the server. PCA is running the radius, the SNMP, and radius server software. The network administrator wants the controller to forward SNMP log messages. Why SNMP? SNMP, that is a protocol which is used to manage the network. How do you see the access points angle? How does the controller know the access points angle? Say there is monitoring. Where there is monitoring, we have SNMP. So server ready reconfigured to act as our SNMP server. So it means as well, once it's on a server, controller rakufana kuziva kuti kana riri kuda information about monitoring kwarinosenda ma traps aro ndekupi. We will configure the IP address of our server per controller. We will also configure the IP address kuudza controller redu kuti radius server riri kupi. I think we'll get there. Controller richada kuudzwa futi kunzi radius server riri kupi. Richada kuudzwa kunzi SNMP server riri kupi as well. The administrator wants to use radius for AAA services. Users will enter username and password credentials and will be verified by radius server. We talked about this. Radius server is required for wireless LANs that are using enterprise authentication. So we'll get there. Two things, SNMP and radius. One is for monitoring, one is for AAA services. How do we configure that? Starting with SNMP, tunaenda pa management, you go to my trap receivers, you create a new server. Once you create a new server, there you have server rako create kwa taisa IP address ye server yedu iyo yakaiswa pa 172.16.1254. Kungoudza, this is where you tell your controller kuti server redu reSNMP riri kupi kana tiri kuda maservices emonitoring, where do we get them? That's basically what you are doing for my configurations are. So IP address of Oisa, you apply, you save my configurations ago. Radius, same thing. Now you go per security, you create a new server. Once you create new server ago, this is what you get. This is what you get. Once you create a new server, this is the information that you get. You can see up IP address server yedu. That's the important thing. Then we have a shared secret. This is the password that will be used to authenticate my access points, not my users. My access points, authentication and access points. Then from there, I think all the other settings, they are default. Let me see. Pane setting right now is all the other settings, I think they are default. You just change, you just input IP address, nekwisa this shared secret. And that's it. Once you apply, it now means controller rako rakuziva kuti for authentication purposes, if I get information from wireless client kuti ruda authenticate information iyoyo ndoisenda kupi, ndoisenda to this address randakapiwa, information enda kuserver rozoti roauthenticator sei. Basically that's it. Once you are done with everything, click apply, then you can see my configurations awaita, nothing to see here. Topology with VLAN 5 addressing. Tapa number 35. Right, each wireless LAN configured on a controller needs its own visual interface. This is not a command. You can have a network in a one wireless LAN, you remove one VLAN, Shanda, but it's not recommended. Therefore, each wireless LAN configured on a controller has its own visual interface. A controller has 5 physical data ports that can be configured to support multiple VLANs, multiple wireless LANs, and visual interfaces. The new wireless LAN will use interface VLAN 5 and network 192.168.50. And therefore, R1 has been configured with VLAN 5 as shown in the topology. So these are some of the things we were saying. Each VLAN, each wireless LAN is associated to a VLAN. Therefore, panapa pachaitwa inter-VLAN routing, panapa pachacreatwa VLANs. And VLAN iroro rishapiwa IP address. And this is the IP address number 5. Basically, VLAN creating a new interface, right? This is where per controller pako you create, I can say, a virtual interface, which can be our association a VLAN. Do panatengera association a VLAN. How do we create a new interface? Tunaenda pa controller, tab recontroller, toyapa ma interfaces. You can see panapa ma interfaces create kwa kudara. I can see ndikuona management interface riripo, redundancy management, redundancy port, device port, virtual interface. Management interface create kwa kudara. Management interface ndo probably riku offer my addresses a management. Ndo .200. In our example, ndo 192.168.200. Network in a .200. Ndo yakacreate where management interface yedu. Ndo rikupa my IP addresses kuma access points yedu. Ndo yapa IP address ku admin, for example. That's the interface. But now we create another interface VLAN 5. Interface VLAN 5 will be associated with wireless LAN creator kumashure wireless LAN number 5. How do you create this VLAN 5 interface? We go to new. Once you have new, you have interface name VLAN 5, VLAN ID. Ukati VLAN 5, you always have VLAN ID 20. Naming of your network becomes very confusing. It's very important that naming, starting with naming your profile, your wireless LAN, naming your SSID, naming your interface, or your visual interfaces. My names are especially my IDs are 5, 555. So that when you do troubleshooting, for example, you can easily identify what network and troubleshoot and the IP. Ukaisa identify akasiyana. That is trouble, basically. So once you create the VLAN name and VLAN ID, you apply. Once you apply, we have a couple of more settings. Port number that you need to configure. Port number is basically the port which associated that VLAN. Tambotaura kuti controller redo rine maports, I think runs rine 5. So rine port number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. VLAN yako, it's either uchaisa port number 1, port number 2, port number 3, port number 4, port number 5. So basically in this example, yakaiswa port number 1. That can change. Then we have the interface address. Interface address yedu. Panapa configure 80.5.254 network mask /24 the default gateway. Default gateway ichicho. Default gateway is the sub interface router pedo. If this is our controller, default gateway is sub interface running or create app. That's where we're getting the default gateway 192.168.5.1. Once you're done, apply. Then we go to configuring the DHCP server address. Ndambomeshena kuti my clients, they get IP addresses from a DHCP server. My clients and management, they get from a DHCP server Reaper controller. Every other client receiving management, it should get its address from the router. So interface rinofana kuudzwa controller, if I can say, controller rinofana kuudzwa kunzi interface rakati should be getting its IP addresses from where. That's why we have our primary DHCP server. So this is for interface redo number 5 here. Interface redo rata create area. Primary DHCP server 192.168.5.1, which is the default gateway yekuenda kurouter. So ndopa unoudza every client rako kuti where will you be getting your IP address? You are getting it from the router. Apply, confirm. Tapedza, we verify interface yedu. You can see interface data creator is VLAN 5, identifier 5. This is the IP address of the interface. Pamunenda mchiti interface VLAN 1. Moisa IP address. Ndopa mchaenda moti interface VLAN 5. Oisa IP address you. Basically. Kanaku create ma VLANs ako pa switch. Right. You can see interface type is dynamic. IPv6 address, we won't get there. So here we're just verifying information here interface data create. Let's continue with the DHCP scope. I feel I can finish this. If this one ends, log in again if you still want to continue.